The smell came first. Pine smoke from morning cook fires, wet iron from the livestock pens,
Take them.
and
It's what you
underneath it
asked for.
all, something
Why help me
sweeter.
now?
Clover
Because we
honey
need you.
mixed with the copper taste of old guilt.
What in the
Declan
world?
Ashford gripped the mule
Behold,
cart's
Thrall,
reins
stop
with
this
fingers that hadn't
madness!
stopped
It is
trembling
done.
in 4 years. The shaking was worse than the cold. October mornings in Nebraska had a way of settling into joints and staying there like debts you couldn't pay down, no matter how hard you worked. Millbrook's Main Street stretched ahead, rutted and familiar. Same general store, same feed depot, same faces that looked away when he passed. He needed candles, salt, a new tin for his bee smoker because the old one had rusted through at the bottom. That was all, in and out. The mule's hooves struck cobblestone in a rhythm that matched his pulse. Steady, guilty, steady, guilty. 4 years ago, he'd left a hive open, just for a minute, maybe 2. Long enough to walk inside the house for a glass of water on a day so hot the air shimmered like broken glass. Sarah had been in bed too weak from the cancer to get up, asking him to check on her medicine. Long enough for Tommy Price, 8 years old, curious as a crow, to wander over from the neighboring farm and stick his hand where it didn't belong. 40 stings. The doctors said Tommy was lucky to be alive. His father said Declan was lucky the boy had survived, or they'd be having a different kind of conversation. The kind that involves sheriffs and lawyers and words like negligence. Tommy lived, but his lungs didn't recover. Not fully, not enough to run or play or breathe without sounding like an old man climbing stairs. Declan's trembling had started that day, holding Tommy's convulsing body in the back of a truck racing toward the hospital in Hastings. The shaking never stopped. Not through the 18 months watching Sarah fade. Not through the 2 years since they'd buried her on the hill behind the house. The mule slowed near the hitching post outside Ruth's store. Declan climbed down, legs stiff from the 5-mile ride. His boots hit packed dirt with a sound like a judge's gavel. "Morning, Declan." Ruth Henson stood behind her counter, 60 years old and sharp as new barbed wire. She was one of maybe 3 people in Millbrook who still used his first name instead of just looking away. Her daughter Martha sometimes came by with bread, another one of the few who still treated him like a person. "Ruth, you're looking thin." "I am thin." That's what I said. She had his supplies ready before he asked. She always did. 6 months of this routine had worn a groove between them. Candles, salt, smoker tin. Ruth set each item on the scarred wooden counter. "Need anything else?" "No." "You sure got fresh bread? Real flour, not that gritty stuff they sell over in Kearney." "Just the supplies." Ruth studied him the way she always did, like she was reading a book he kept trying to close. Her eyes lingered on his hands. The unsteady grip was visible today, even when he wasn't holding anything. "There's a trader," she said. "East end of town. Orc fellow came in last night with a wagon." "Don't need anything from a trader." "I know you don't need anything, but you should see what he's selling before you leave." Declan gathered his purchases, paid in coins that clinked against the counter, and didn't ask what she meant. Ruth had a habit of steering him toward things he didn't want to see, and she was usually right about it, which made it worse. He would have headed straight back to his cart if the East Road wasn't his only way out of town. The trader had set up near the water trough a heavy wagon with iron bars welded to one side like a livestock pen. 2 men stood nearby, arms crossed, watching with the dull curiosity of people who had nothing better to study. Inside the cage sat a girl with her knees drawn to her chest. She was Orc, green skin, tusked. The tips of her canines showed pale and underdeveloped where a full-blood's would have been prominent. She was smaller than any Orc Declan had seen, slight, where her kind usually ran broad. "That one won't last a day on a farm," one of the men said. "She's the last one." The trader was a big man, bored-looking, sitting on an upturned barrel and picking dried meat from his teeth. "Had 3. Sold 2 over in Kearney. This one nobody wants." "Why not? Too small. Orcs don't want her, say she's defective. Humans don't want her, say she's still Orc. Been trying to move her for a week." "What's wrong with her?" "Nothing's wrong with me." The girl's voice was clear and sharp, like a blade honed on purpose. "I'm sitting in a cage. That's what's wrong." The trader kicked the bars. "Shut it." "Make me. You've been trying for a week. How's that working out?" The 2 men laughed. The trader didn't. Neither did Declan. He looked at the girl. She looked back. Not begging, not afraid, reading him the way you read weather to decide if it's the kind that passes quick or the kind that stays. He should leave. He had candles and salt and a rusted smoker tin to replace, but his feet didn't move, and the girl's eyes stayed on him, still measuring. "What do you want for her?" Declan asked. The trader's eyebrows went up. "You serious?" "I asked the price. Coin's good. Anything you got." "I don't carry coin." Declan jerked his thumb toward his cart. "I have 6 jars of mountain honey and a block of beeswax. That's my trade." The trader laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. "Honey for an orc. For whatever's in that cage, take it or don't." The trader looked at the girl, then at Declan, then at the 2 men who'd already lost interest. He chewed the inside of his cheek. "Fine, honey and wax, but you take her as is. No returns, no complaints." Wasn't planning on either. Declan unloaded the jars onto the wax block. The trader opened the cage door. The girl sat still for a moment, watching the open door like it was a different kind of trap. "You coming?" Declan asked. "Where?" "My farm, 5 miles north." "Why?" "Because I just traded 6 jars of honey for you, and I'd like to leave before he changes his mind." She climbed out. Her bare feet touched dirt, and she winced, soles cut up, but she straightened immediately like it never happened. "I won't be your servant," she said. "Didn't ask for one." "Or your wife?" "Definitely didn't ask for that." "Then what?" Declan climbed onto the cart. "I keep bees. They need tending. Heard orcs have a way with them." "Who told you that?" "Nobody. I made it up. Get on the cart." She stared at him. He stared back. The mule shifted its weight and sighed, which seemed like the most honest thing said so far. The girl climbed onto the cart. She sat as far from him as the wooden bench allowed, which wasn't far. Her hands gripped the edge like she might jump. "What's your name?" Declan asked as the mule pulled them onto the road. "Sarah." Declan didn't ask. "I know. Told you anyway." Dust rose from the road and the afternoon heat came up in waves that made the hills shimmer. Sarah sat rigid on the cart, her eyes moving across the landscape with the quick attention of someone counting escape routes. "Is this road always this bad?" she asked. Declan didn't answer. "Those potholes are deep enough to break an axle. You should fill them." "Nothing." "That fence is crooked. See it, 3rd post from the bend." "Not my fence. Whose is it?" "Don't know. Don't care." "That too." "You don't care about much, do you?" "I care about getting home before dark." Silence settled for maybe 30 seconds. It was the longest she'd been quiet since leaving Millbrook. "Why do you live 5 miles from town?" 6 seemed excessive. "Is that a joke?" "Closest I get." She studied his face. His jaw was clenched tight enough to cut rope. The lines around his eyes came from squinting into light and everything else. His hands were rough scarred, his knuckles swollen in a way that suggested old breaks healed without a doctor's help. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What were you expecting?" "Someone who talks more." Men who buy people usually talk a lot. They explain why they're doing it, tell you how grateful you should be. She pulled at a loose thread on her dress. "You haven't explained anything." "Nothing to explain." "You traded honey for an orc girl you've never met. That needs explaining." Declan steered the mule around a deep rut without responding. The cart jolted. Sarah grabbed the bench. "There's bread in the box behind you," he said, "if you're hungry." She didn't reach for it. Kept watching him, trying to find the angle to trick the moment when the trap closed. It didn't close. Another mile down the road, she reached back and took the bread, ate it in small, careful bites. "Good bread," she said almost to herself. "Ruth makes it. Her daughter Martha brings it by sometimes." "The store woman." "Yeah." She looked at me like I was a person. Ruth looks at everyone like that. It's unsettling. And the farm smelled like wood smoke, and something sweeter, maybe clover, or the waxy light scent of beehives that hadn't been properly tended in too long. The house stood dark against the tree line. Windows shuttered, door locked. The place looked closed up from the inside and forgotten. Declan drove the cart past the house without stopping, heading straight for the barn. "Isn't that your house?" Sarah asked, pointing back. "Yeah." "Then why are we going to the barn?" "Because I sleep there." She waited for more. He didn't give it. He climbed down from the cart, unhitched the mule, and led it to a stall with the practiced ease of a man who'd done it 1,000 times. Sarah stood at the barn's entrance. The place was cleaner than she expected. Swept floor, tools organized, a bed in the far corner. "You actually live here," she said. "I actually live here. But you have a house." "I do." "Why?" Declan lit the lantern. The warm light made the space look almost livable. "There's another bed in the storage room. I'll get it." "Why, where?" "Heard you the first time." He set the lantern down and looked at her directly. His eyes were the color of dishwater, gray-faded, tired. "The house is full of memories. I don't sleep well with memories." Sarah stared at him. Something shifted in her face. Not sympathy, but closer to recognition. "I know what that's like." Declan pulled the second bed from behind a stack of feed bags. He set it up on the opposite side of the barn on his own near the wall where the wood was newer. Pointed at a trunk. "Blankets there. Outhouse is 20 paces east behind the barn. Water pumps by the house." He paused. "Door doesn't lock from either side." "What if I leave?" "Then you leave." "What if I take something?" "Then I'll have less." "Aren't you worried about what you stealing and running off?" Declan sat on his bed and pulled off his boots. "You've been in a cage for a week. You're barefoot, you're hungry, and you don't know the area. You won't rob me tonight." A pause. "Maybe next week." Sarah's mouth twitched. She caught it and stopped it before it became a smile. She took the blanket, wrapped it around her shoulders, and sat on the bed with her back to the wall. She didn't lie down. Watched him the way she'd been watching him all day, measuring, testing, waiting for her turn. Declan put out the lantern. The barn fell into darkness, broken only by thin moonlight through the cracks. "Good night, Sarah." No answer. He didn't expect one. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling beams, listening to familiar sounds. The mule shifting in its stall wind, humming through the eaves, the faint pulse of something living in the walls, probably mice. And now, under all of it, the sound of someone else breathing. It had been 2 years since he'd heard that sound. He'd forgotten how loud quiet company could be. Cold morning light crept into the barn, cutting the floor into bars. Declan woke to a sound he didn't recognize at first. Rhythmic tapping, wood against wood coming from outside. He pulled on his boots and stepped into daylight. The air was cold frost, still clinging to the grass. He followed the sound past the water pump, past the withered garden, past the woodpile to the back of the property where 6 beehives stood in a crooked row. 3 were intact. 2 leaned on their bases. One was broken, its box cracked frames, scattered wax exposed and dark with age. Sarah crouched beside the broken hive. She'd pulled out the frames and laid them on the ground. Her hands moved through the wreckage with a focus that was almost tender, turning each piece over, examining the wax, brushing dead bees from her fingertips. "What are you doing?" Declan asked. "Looking." "I didn't tell you to touch them." "You didn't tell me not to." She lifted a frame. The wax was dark but intact, and a thin line of honey gleamed along one edge. "This hive isn't dead. The queen moved. She's inside." Sarah pointed to the tilted hive beside it. "Took what was left of the colony with air." Declan stepped closer. "How do you know?" "Because I can hear them." She pressed her ear against the side of the tilted hive. 60, maybe 70 workers. Not enough to survive winter, but enough to rebuild if we merge the colonies. You can hear them count. I can hear the pitch." The buzzing increased, rising in tone. She set the frame down. "These hives are falling apart. When's the last time you tended them?" I tend them." "You tend 3. The other 3 you've let go." Declan's jaw tightened. "I had 6 hives 4 years ago. Lost 3 after..." He stopped. Breathed. Started again. Lost 3. Sarah watched him the way she watched everything, direct, unblinking, waiting for what came after silence. "I can fix this," she said. "Didn't ask you to." "Not asking permission, just telling you what I can do." She picked up a piece of the broken hive box. "This wood's still good. It's the joints that failed, not the boards. I need to hammer some nails and sealant." "Pine resin." "Pine resin works." "Where?" He gestured toward the barn. She stood and walked past him without a word. This girl who'd been in a cage yesterday, barefoot, thin rope, burns on her wrist, now walking his property like she owned it. She came back with the hammer, a tin of nails, and a jar of resin he had forgotten he had. knelt beside the broken hive and started rebuilding it, fitting the boards together, sealing the gaps, working with a precision that made his fence work look sloppy. Declan stood with his hands in his pockets, not sure if he should be angry or impressed. He settled on bewildered, which seemed like a reasonable middle ground. By noon, the hive was reassembled. It didn't look pretty rough, seemed slightly crooked base, but it was solid. Sarah set it up right and stepped back. Now we split the merged colony. Move half the bees into this one. They'll follow the comb. You've done this before. My grandmother kept hives before the raids. Before everything. She wiped her hands on her dress. It's the only thing I know that nobody took from me. Declan looked at the rebuilt hive. Something cracked and destroyed, put back together with nails and resin, and the knowledge of a girl nobody wanted. Damaged things still work, she said. She said it to the hive, not to him, but he heard it anyway. They spent the rest of the afternoon splitting the colony, worked the frames with bare hands, no smoke, no gloves, no hesitation. Bees landed on Sarah's arms, and she let them moving slow, humming something low under her breath. They're not stinging you, Declan said. They have no reason to. Bees don't need a reason. Everything needs a reason. Bees sting when they're scared. I don't scare them. How? I move slow and I'm warm. Warm. Orc body temperature runs hotter than human. Bees like warmth. She transferred a frame to the rebuilt hive. Your hands are cold. That's why they sting you. Declan looked at his trembling fingers. She wasn't wrong. They were always cold now. Had been for years. Since before the farm, since before the accident, since before everything else. Will you teach me? He asked. Will you listen? Probably not. Then I'll teach you anyway. By evening, all 6 hives stood in a row upright, sealed, humming. Declan stood at the edge of the yard watching the last of the bees return to their entrances as the light faded. Sarah walked up beside him, arms crossed the barn blanket draped over her shoulders. Tomorrow we fix the other 2 stands, she said, and the brokerage needs a new bellows. You're planning. Someone has to. You've let this place die. I kept it alive. Barely, he wanted to argue. Couldn't because she was right and they both knew it. Supper, he said. What are we having? Beans, bread if there's any left. You ate the bread from the cart, then just beans. They walked back to the barn. Declan heated beans on a small stove near the door. They ate sitting on their separate beds, tin bowls in their laps, firelight throwing long shadows on the walls. Declan, what? Don't trade honey for people again. It's weird. He almost laughed. Almost. The sound caught somewhere in his chest, but the shape of it stayed on his face a second longer than expected. Noted, he said. That night she slept in the bed. He could hear her breathing settle, not deep, not surrendered completely, but closer to rest than the night before. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling beams, thinking about beehives. 6 colonies, all alive for the first time in 4 years. Damaged things still work. She'd said it about the hive. But lying there in the dark, listening to her breathe, he wondered if maybe she'd meant something else entirely. The second morning came with fog so thick Declan could barely see the fence line from the barn door. Sarah was already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed, braiding her hair, with fingers that moved like they'd done this 10,000 times. We should check the hives, she said. Moisture gets in the cracks. After breakfast. Bees don't wait for breakfast. She was right. She was usually right, which was starting to become a pattern he couldn't decide if he liked or not. They walked through fog that clung to their clothes like wet wool. The hives appeared as dark shapes in the gray, humming low and constant. Sarah pressed her ear against each one, listening for something Declan couldn't hear. This one's strong. This one's building. This one, she tapped the 3rd hive. The queen's not laying properly. Hear it. Declan leaned in. To him, it sounded like every other hive, just buzzing. I don't hear anything different. The pitch is off, too low, means the workers are stressed. She straightened. We need to check the frames, see if she's alive or if they're trying to raise a new one. Now, Sarah, bees don't wait for convenience either. She was already walking back to the barn for the smoker and tools. Declan followed, hands shoved in his pockets against the cold, wondering when exactly he'd stopped being the one who made decisions on his own farm. They worked the hive in silence. Sarah moved the frames with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone who'd been locked in a cage 4 days ago. Each comb lifted slow and deliberate. Bees crawled across her hands. Not one stung. There, she pointed to a cell pattern on the frame. See how these are capped irregular queens old, failing. What do we do? Let them raise a new one. They already started. She showed him a cluster of larger cells hanging from the frame's bottom edge. Queen cups. In 2 weeks, you'll have a new matriarch. She said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. Life ending, life beginning, just part of the cycle. How'd you learn all this? Declan asked. My grandmother. She kept bees in the borderlands before the clan wars. Sarah carefully replaced the frame. Said bees were the only thing that didn't care if you were orc or human or something in between. They only cared if you were careful. Your grandmother sounds smart. She was. Until she wasn't anymore. Sarah closed the hive without explaining further. Declan didn't push. There was a weight to the way she said it that made questions feel like trespassing. They walked back to the barn as the fog started to lift. Golden light broke through in shafts that made the wet grass shine like broken glass. Sarah stopped halfway across the yard and tilted her face toward the sun. First warm light in a week, she said. For just a moment, with her eyes closed and her face to the sky, she looked younger than whatever years she carried. Looked like someone who hadn't spent time in a cage or been called defective or learned to measure every person for the angle they were working. Then she opened her eyes and the hardness came back. Breakfast, she said, before the bees need something else. They ate oats cooked over the barn stove. Not much to it, just oats and water and a pinch of salt. But Sarah ate like it was the best meal she'd had in months, which maybe it was. This farm, she said between bites. How long have you had it? 7 years. Bought it after I got married. Where's your wife? Dead. 2 years. Sarah's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. I'm sorry. Don't be, you didn't know her. Still, they ate in silence for a minute. The barn filled with the small sounds of spoons against tin and the stove's faint crackle. What was her name? Sarah asked. Sarah. How'd she die? Cancer. Stomach. Took 18 months from diagnosis to the end. Declan set his bowl aside. Doctors in Hastings did what they could. Wasn't enough. Is that why you sleep in the barn? He looked at her. She didn't look away. The house still smells like her, he said. Lavender soap and the bread she used to make. I couldn't, he stopped. It was easier out here. Easier isn't the same as better. No, it's not. Sarah finished her oats and stood. Rinsed the bowl in the water bucket by the door. Show me how to use the smoker properly. I've been guessing. The subject change was a kindness. Declan took it. They spent the morning working with the smoker, learning the right amount of fuel, the right pace of pumping the bellows. Sarah caught on fast, too fast for someone who claimed she'd been guessing. Her hands moved with a confidence that spoke of muscle memory, not improvisation. Your grandmother taught you this too, Declan said. Most of it. The rest I learned from trial and a lot of stings. Thought you said bees don't sting you. They don't now. Took a while to get here. She held up her left hand. 3 small scars marked the webbing between her thumb and forefinger. These were from the same hive. Same day. I was 12 and impatient. What did you learn? That impatience gets you hurt, and that bees have long memories. She said it with a half smile that changed her whole face. Made her look less like someone who'd survived things and more like someone who might have once enjoyed them. There it is, Declan said. There what is. That thing your face does when you're not measuring me for how I might hurt you. The smile disappeared. I'm not. You are, and I don't blame you. He set the smoker down. But for what it's worth, I'm not planning to hurt you or return you or whatever else you're worried about. People say a lot of things. I'm not people. No, Sarah said quietly. You're not. They stood there in the yard with the sun warming the fog off the grass and the bees humming in their boxes and something shifting in the air between them that neither one knew how to name. Lunch, Declan said finally. Then I need to fix the fence on the east pasture before winter. I'll help. You don't have to. I know. She helped anyway. They worked the fence line through the afternoon, replacing posts, stringing new wire, hammering staples into wood that had gone soft with rot. Sarah worked without complaint, her hands already developing new calluses on top of old scars. You're good at this, Declan said, watching her secure a wire with 3 efficient twists. I'm good at most things people don't expect me to be good at. Because you're orc. Because I'm half. She moved to the next post. Too orc for humans to trust. Too human for orcs to respect. Turns out when nobody expects anything from you, you get good at everything just to prove them wrong. That sounds exhausting. It is. She hammered a staple with more force than necessary, but it's better than accepting what they think you are. Declan held the next post steady while she worked. His trembling lessened when his hands had something to hold on to. Less, but not gone. Never gone. The shaking Sarah said, not looking up. Is that from your wife dying? No, that's from Tommy. Who's Tommy? The fence post creaked in his grip. Neighbor's kid, 8 years old. 4 years ago, I left a hive open while I went inside for water. My wife was dying. She needed her medicine. He wandered over, got curious. Sarah stopped working. How many stings? 40. She sucked air through her teeth. He survived. Yeah, but his lungs didn't. Not fully, not enough to run anymore. Can't play. Every breath sounds like drowning. Declan's voice came out flat, rehearsed. These were words he'd said before in his head to himself 1,000 times. His father, Robert Price, said I was lucky the boy lived. Otherwise, we'd be having a different conversation. You've been punishing yourself since. Wouldn't you? I don't know. I've never hurt a child. Sarah picked up her hammer again. But I know what it's like to carry something that won't let go. Feels different from grief. Grief you can set down sometimes. Guilt just gets heavier. They worked in silence after that, the fence slowly becoming whole again, post by post, wire by wire. As the sun dropped toward the horizon, the first clouds rolled in from the west, dark and heavy with the promise of rain. Storm coming, Sarah said, studying the sky. Should hit tonight. The hives. We'll be fine. They've survived worse. But Sarah was already walking back toward them, quick and purposeful. By the time Declan caught up, she was dragging canvas tarps from the barn. Help me rig these, she said. The rebuilt one needs cover. Seams aren't sealed enough yet. They worked as the first drops started to fall, cold and fat and smelling like iron. Stretched canvas over wooden frames. Secured ropes. By the time they finished, the rain was coming down steady and hard. They ran for the barn, made it inside, soaked through water dripping from their clothes onto the swept floor. Bees'll be fine, Sarah said, breathing hard from the run. I know. The hive you rebuilt is stronger than it looks. I know that too. She wrung water from her hair. Her shirt clung to her shoulders, dark green skin showing through where the fabric went transparent. Declan looked away, busied himself with the stove. We should get dry, he said. I've got extra clothes in the trunk. Your wife's clothes. Some are just old work things. I'll take the work things. He found her a shirt that was too big and pants she had to roll at the ankles. She changed behind the stall partition while he did the same. When they emerged, they looked like two people playing dress-up in someone else's life. The rain hammered the barn roof. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and constant. 3 days, Sarah said, listening. This'll last 3 days at least. How do you know? Smell, pressure, the way the wind shifted. She sat on her bed, tucking her feet under her. Grandmother taught me that too. Said weather and bees were the 2 things you had to learn to read if you wanted to survive. She taught you a lot. Everything that mattered, and Sarah was quiet for a moment. She died when I was 15. Lung fever. Took her in 4 days. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Nobody could do anything. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders. After she died, the clan elders had no reason to keep me around. Half-blood girl with no useful family. They sold my mother's shame to the first trader who'd take me. Your mother left when I was 6, had to. The clan gave my father a choice, his human wife or his honor. He chose honor. There was no bitterness in her voice, just fact. I don't even know if she's still alive. The rain filled the silence between them. Declan fed more wood to the stove, watched the flames catch and spread. My hands started shaking the day I held Tommy in the truck, he said. Driving to the hospital. He was convulsing, couldn't breathe. I kept thinking if I could just drive fast enough, hold on tight enough, it would be okay. He looked at his unsteady grip, the tremor visible in the firelight. Hasn't stopped since. Doctor said it's nerve damage from stress. Might heal, might not. Do you want it to stop? Sometimes, other times I think I deserve it. Reminder of what happens when you're careless. Sarah leaned forward, elbows on her knees. You made a mistake. One mistake. You've been paying for it 4 years. At what point does the debt get settled? When Tommy can run again. That's not how debts work. You can't pay something back if the person you owe won't accept payment. His father won't even look at me. So you're punishing yourself for someone else's inability to forgive. She shook her head. That's not justice. That's just suffering. Declan wanted to argue, wanted to explain how she didn't understand, but the words dried up in his throat because maybe possibly she understood better than anyone. Your grandmother, he said, the thing she said about broken things, did she mean it? She meant it about tools, but she taught me it applied to people too. Sarah looked at him across the barn. We're all broken something, Declan. The question isn't whether we're broken, it's whether we still matter. The rain pounded harder. Thunder shook the walls. I think you matter, Declan said quietly. I know, that's why I'm still here. They sat in the warmth of the stove, listening to the storm, two damaged things that still functioned, finding shelter under the same roof. The rain lasted 3 days, just like Sarah predicted. On the morning of the fourth day, Declan woke to sunlight streaming through the barn's cracks and the sound of the door opening. He sat up fast, reached for nothing. He didn't keep weapons. Hadn't in years. Sarah stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright morning. She had something in her hands. What are you doing? He asked. Going to the house. Why, to clean it. She was gone before he could respond. Declan pulled on his boots and followed, found her standing in the house's main room, looking around with the same assessing gaze she'd used on the hives. Sarah, when's the last time you opened these windows? I don't. The air in here is dead. She unlatched the first window, pushed it open. Light and fresh air flooded in. This place isn't a tomb. Stop treating it like one. She moved through the room with purpose, took down Sarah's coat from the hook by the door, folded it carefully and placed it in a trunk. I didn't throw it away, she said, catching his expression. Just moved it somewhere it won't haunt you every time you walk in. She found Sarah's old work boots in the bedroom closet, tried them on. They fit almost perfectly. These I'm keeping, she said. My feet are still healing and yours are too big. Declan stood in the doorway of his own house watching this orc girl rearrange his grief into something manageable. He should have been angry, should have told her to stop, but instead he just felt tired and grateful in equal measure. The table needs cleaning, Sarah said, and those jars on the shelf are covered in dust. When's the last time you cooked in here? 8 months. That's what I thought. She tied her pant hair back with a strip of cloth. Go check the hives. I'll handle this. You don't have to. I know. Going to anyway. He left her there and spent the morning walking the property, checking fence lines, clearing winter debris. But his mind kept drifting back to the house, to the sound of windows opening, to the image of Sarah in Sarah's boots making the dead space livable again. When he came back at noon, the transformation was complete. Windows open, floors swept, table scrubbed clean. The cook stove had been fired up and something that smelled like beans and herbs bubbled in a pot. Sit, Sarah said, pointing to the table. This is my house. Then sit in your house. He sat. She served beans in bowls that had been Sarah's, set spoons that had been Sarah's. And for the first time in 2 years, Declan ate a meal at a table meant for two. The food was simple. The company was strange. But the table didn't feel like a monument to the dead anymore. It felt like furniture. Just furniture. Useful and ordinary and present. This is good, he said. It's beans. Still good. Sarah reached for the salt. Her hand brushed his on the table. The contact lasted half a second. Nothing really. But Declan felt the heat of her skin like touching something fresh from a fire. He pulled back. She did too. Neither mentioned it. But that night when Sarah made up the small bed in the back room of the house, instead of returning to the barn, Declan didn't question it. And when he lay in his own bed in the main room for the first time in 2 years, listening to the sound of someone else breathing in his house, he thought about broken things. About hives that still produced honey, about fence posts that still held wire, about two people nobody wanted sitting at a table passing salt, and maybe, just maybe, finding something worthwhile in each other. The next afternoon, Declan walked alone to the hill behind the house. Sarah's grave sat beneath a cottonwood tree, marked by a simple wooden cross he'd carved himself. The wood had weathered gray over 2 years, but it still stood straight. He knelt in the grass hat in his hands. I met someone, he said to the silent earth. I know that sounds, I don't know what it sounds like. She's not you. Nobody could be you. The wind moved through the cottonwood leaves. No answer. There never was. She fixed the hives. All six are working now. You'd like that. You always said I neglected them when I got busy. He turned his hat in his hands, fingers tracing the brim. She cleaned the house too, made me sit at our table. First time in 2 years I didn't feel like a ghost in my own home. His vision blurred. He blinked hard. I think, his voice cracked, I think I'm ready to let go. Not of you, never you, but of the guilt, the sleeping in the barn, the shutting everything out. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I think you'd want me to. You never liked seeing things go to waste. He stood, placed his hand on the cross. I'm sorry it took so long. Walking back down the hill, his trembling hands felt steadier than they had in 4 years. Not perfect, not healed, but maybe on the way. Sarah was on the porch when he returned, mending a shirt in the fading light. You all right? She asked. Yeah, I think I am. She nodded, didn't pry, went back to her stitching. That night they ate at the table again, and when Declan went to bed in the house's main room, the dreams that came were gentle ones, memories without the weight of regret. 2 weeks passed like water finding level. Sarah worked the hives with a rhythm that spoke of years, not days. Declan worked beside her, learning to read the pitch of the swarm, the pattern of the capped cells, the difference between a colony thriving and one barely holding on. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. The work spoke for itself. On the 15th day, Declan hitched the mule to drive into Millbrook for supplies. Sarah climbed onto the cart without asking. You don't have to come, he said. You need flour. I need to see something other than bees in your barn. It's a house now. House with furniture I rearranged. She was right. Despite the clean floors and open windows, the place still felt temporary, like they were both waiting for permission to call it permanent. The road to Millbrook was dry and rutted from 2 weeks without rain. The mule took its time and neither of them rushed it. Morning sun warmed the October chill into something almost comfortable. People are going to stare, Declan said. They always stare. At me or you, Emma. Both probably. She was right about that too. Millbrook on a Saturday morning ran loud with commerce and gossip. Wagon wheels on cobblestone, dogs barking, vendors calling prices on feed and flour and everything in between. Sarah stayed close to the cart, not from fear, but strategy. Standing near Declan meant standing near the closest thing she had to cover. The stairs started at the edge of town. A woman froze halfway to her clothesline. 2 men outside the tavern went quiet. A child pointed until his mother pulled his hand down. Told you, Declan muttered. Your jaw says you care more than you're letting on. You notice too much. Survival skill. Ruth's store sat in the middle of Main Street, familiar and safe as worn boots. The bell above the door chimed when they entered. Ruth looked up from her counter, saw Sarah, then Declan, then back to Sarah with an expression that mixed curiosity and approval. So you're the one, Ruth said. The one what? Sarah asked. Who fixed his hives? He's been buying twice as many jars as he usually brings in. Figured either he learned to eat honey by the pound or someone was helping. I'm helping. Good, he needs it. Ruth set supplies on the counter, flour, salt, a spool of thread. You need anything specific? Sarah hesitated. It had been a long time since anyone asked her that. Soap, she said, if you have it. 3 kinds, lavender, pine, plain. Plain. Smart girl. Not a girl, Ruth smiled. Smart woman. Better. She wrapped the soap in cloth and added it to the rest. My daughter Martha and I were talking about bringing you both some bread. You're welcome here anytime. Saray took the soap, weighed it in her hand. A small thing, simple, but hers, something she'd chosen for herself. Outside, a man stood by the cart, late 50s, weathered face, the kind of hardness that came from working land that didn't want it to be worked. Declan, the man said. Robert. Robert Price, Tommy's father? The name hung between them like smoke. Council's been talking, Robert said, about the orc. Her name's Sarah. People are concerned. People are bored. This isn't a joke, Declan. There are rules about what? About who I employ on my own land. Robert's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. If she stays, there'll be consequences. Your market access, your trade routes, your standing in this community. Declan loaded the supplies into the cart with fingers that trembled more than usual. I don't have standing in this community, Robert. You made sure of that 4 years ago. That's not fair. Affair, Declan turned, and something in his voice made people nearby stop to listen. You want to talk about fair? I made a mistake. One mistake, and I've been paying for it every day since. Your son is alive. Damaged, yes, but alive. And I'm sorry I'll be sorry until the day I die. But I'm not going to spend the rest of my life waiting for your permission to stop punishing myself. Robert's face went red, then white. He opened his mouth closed, it opened it again. This isn't over, he said finally. It never is with you. Robert walked away. The small crowd that had gathered dispersed like smoke. Sarah climbed onto the cart soap still clutched in her hand. I should leave, she said quietly. Declan snapped the reins. The mule started forward. No. If I go, everything goes back to normal. Normal was sleeping in a barn with dead hives in a house I was too afraid to enter. That what you want me to go back to? Sarah didn't answer. Just held the soap and watched the town disappear behind them. They rode in silence until the farm came into view. Declan stopped the cart at the top of the rise looking down at the property, the house with its open windows, the barn with its swept floor, the 6 hives standing in their neat row. I don't want you to leave, he said. The words came out rough like something dragged over gravel. I know that's not enough of a reason to ask you to stay somewhere that might not be safe. But it's the truth. First honest thing I've said in a long time. Sarah looked at him. Really looked. Not measuring, not testing. Just seeing. One more day, she said. I'll stay one more day. Then I'll decide. Fair enough. That night, Sarah sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the road where Robert and his warnings had disappeared. Declan brought out 2 cups of weak coffee and sat beside her. They'll come back, she said. Maybe with more people. Maybe with something worse than words. Maybe. And you'll what? Fight an entire town council with a bee smoker? If I have to. She almost smiled. Almost. That might be the dumbest thing you have said yet. Probably. They drank their coffee as the sun set and the October cold crept in. Frost was coming. You could smell it in the air, that metallic bite that meant winter was finally done threatening and starting to arrive. Thank you, Sarah said. For what? For not making me wait into the cart. You're not cargo. I know, but most people forget that when they see green skin. Declan set his cup down. Most people are idiots. This time she did smile. Small, but real. They sat in the cold until the coffee was gone and the stars came out sharp and bright. Then they went inside to separate rooms, to separate beds, each wondering what the next day would bring. Dawn came cold and clear. Declan woke to the sound that didn't belong. Hoofbeats on frozen ground moving fast. Multiple horses. He was on his feet before his eyes were fully open, boots half-laced, stumbling to the window. 6 riders coming up the road at a pace that said they weren't here to talk. Sarah, she appeared from the back room already dressed, already alert. How many? 6. The traitor. Don't know, can't tell from here. They moved to the porch together. The riders were close enough now to make out details. Leading them was Torvin, the traitor who'd sold Sarah 2 weeks ago. Behind him rode 5 orcs, all bigger than Sarah, all carrying themselves like men who expected this to be quick. The riders stopped at the fence line, didn't dismount. That was a message in itself. Staying mounted meant they saw themselves as the ones with power. Morning, farmer, Torvin called out. Come for what's mine. Nothing here belongs to you, Torvin smiled. It wasn't pleasant. The girl, she was a trade for labor and goods, not permanent ownership. I've come to collect. Show me the contract. Don't need a contract. Then you don't have a claim. One of the other orcs shifted in his saddle. Just give her to us and we'll leave peaceful. No trouble. And if I don't, then trouble. Declan's hands trembled worse than usual, the shaking that never left amplified by adrenaline and the cold. But his voice stayed steady. She's not mine to give. The house door opened behind them. Sarah stepped out wearing Sarah's old work boots in a dress 2 sizes too big. But the way she held herself made her look taller than any of the men on horseback. Sarah, get back inside. No. She walked past Declan to the fence, looked up at Torvin with eyes that didn't blink or flinch. You said I was defective, she said. Unsellable. Waste of feed. That's what you told everyone in Millbrook. Business is business. Then this is business too. You sold me. Final sale. No returns. Your words. Wasn't a sale, was a labor contract. Show me the paper. Don't need. Show me the paper or admit you sold a person and now want to steal them back because your pride got hurt. Torvin's face darkened. The five riders behind him shifted hands, moving toward their belts where Declan could see the handles of short blades. Last chance, Torvin said. Come peaceful or we take you. Sarah smiled. It was the smile of someone who'd been pushed past caring about consequences. Try it, she said, but I should warn you, I've made some friends since you left me here. She turned and walked toward the hives. Not running, not hurrying, just walking with purpose. Declan's heart kicked against his ribs. Sarah, what are you? Do you trust me? Do you trust me? He looked at her, standing there halfway between the house and the hives, asking him a question that felt bigger than the moment. Yes. Then get behind me and cover your ears. She reached the first hive and placed both hands flat against the wood, started humming low and rhythmic, a sound that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her throat. The same tune she'd hummed when working the frames. The one her grandmother had taught her. The humming grew louder, and the hives answered. The sound started small, just the normal background hum of bees in their boxes. Then it built, rose in pitch and volume until it sounded like a single massive chord made of 60,000 tiny voices. One by one, Sarah opened all 6 hives, removed the covers, pulled the inner lids, exposed the frames to cold October air, and let the bees pour out. They came like water from a broken dam. Black and gold bodies filling the air in a cloud that moved like something alive, something with purpose. They didn't attack, didn't sting. Just swarms surrounding Sarah in a living storm that responded to her humming like an orchestra to a conductor. The horses panicked first, started backing up, tossing their heads, fighting their riders. The orcs cursed and tried to control their mounts, but horses know instinct better than commands, and every instinct they had was screaming, run. Call them off, Torvin shouted. Sarah stopped humming. The bees hovered waiting. Leave, she said. Leave now and they stay calm. Try to come through this fence and I stop controlling them. Your choice. You're bluffing. Am I? Sarah raised one hand. The swarm shifted, moved closer to the riders. 60,000 bees. You know what happens when orcs get stung. Your kind fear them for a reason. Something in the venom hits you different. Harder. That was a lie. Declan knew it was a lie, but Torvin didn't. The traitor looked at Sarah, at the cloud of bees, at his riders, already fighting their terrified horses. This isn't over, he said. It is, because I was never yours to begin with. Torvin pulled his horse around and rode hard back down the road. The other 5 followed their horses, more than happy to run. The cloud of bees hung in the air for another moment, then slowly, incredibly began flowing back into the hives like water running uphill. Sarah stood in the middle of the yard, breathing hard sweat on her face despite the cold. Declan walked to her, trembling hands, heart pounding. How did you? Orcs aren't really more susceptible to bee venom, but Torvin's from the south, they believe old stories. I just used his fear against him. And the bees, temperature, I ran hot enough to make them think it was warmer than it was, confuse them into thinking they could fly. The humming kept them calm. Grandmother's lullaby. They associated it with safety. She looked at the open hives. We need to get them back inside before they freeze. They worked quickly, carefully, getting the bees sealed back in their boxes. By the time they finished, Declan's fingers were stiff with cold, and his heart had finally stopped trying to punch through his ribs. That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen, he said. Stupid and brave look the same until you know how it ends. They walked back to the house. Sarah's feet ached from standing on frozen ground despite the boots. Declan got her inside, got the stove going, made her sit. You're staying, he said. Yes. Not one more day, just staying. Yes. Why, she looked at him with eyes that had read weather and bees and the intentions of men for more years than her face showed. Because damaged things still matter, so Declan said. And maybe because you're not the only one tired of being alone. The knock came an hour later. Declan opened the door expecting trouble, found Ruth instead with a small group from town, her daughter Martha carrying a basket. The blacksmith, 2 farmers Declan barely knew, And behind them, looking small and uncomfortable, Robert Price. Saw what happened, Martha said. Wanted to make sure you were all right. We're fine. Good, because I'll tell you right now, not everyone in this town is an idiot. Some of us remember what it's like to be judged for things we can't control. She looked past Declan to where Sarah sat by the stove. Girls welcome here, far as I'm concerned. Anyone has a problem with that can take it up with me. Ruth nodded, so did the blacksmith. Robert Price stood at the back of the group, hands in his pockets, jaw working like he had something to say, but couldn't get it past his teeth. Tommy wants to meet you, he said finally. Both of you. Robert, not asking for me, for him. Robert's voice cracked slightly. Boy's been asking questions. About bees, about what happened. Says he wants to understand. Declan looked at Sarah. She nodded. Tomorrow, Declan said. We'll come by tomorrow. The group dispersed. Robert lingered for a moment, looking like he wanted to say more. Didn't. Just nodded and left. That night, Sarah slept in the small bed in the back room. Declan lay in the main room, listening to the house settle the wind outside the sound of someone else breathing. For the first time in 2 years, the house didn't feel like a monument. It felt like a home. The next morning, they walked to the Price farm, took the long way around through the backfields because the road felt too exposed, too watched. Tommy sat on the porch, a blanket around his shoulders despite the mild afternoon sun. 11 years old now, but smaller than he should have been. His legs dangled thin and pale over the edge of the boards. He looked up when they approached. Didn't smile. Didn't frown, just watched. Hello, Tommy, Declan said. Mr. Ashford. The boy's voice was steady, older than his years. Miss Sarah? Sarah nodded. Just Sarah. They stood awkward for a moment, 3 people connected by damage none of them had chosen. Dad said you keep bees, Tommy said. I do. And you bomb? He looked at Sarah. You can make them do things. Not make. Ask. There's a difference. Can you teach me? The question hung there. Sarah glanced at Declan. He nodded. Maybe, she said. If you're patient, bees don't respond well to rushing. I can be patient. Don't have much choice. Tommy touched his chest where his lungs labored beneath the blanket. Can't run anymore. Gotta find other things to do. Running's overrated, Sarah said. Watching is better. Bees taught me that. Tommy almost smiled. My dad says Mr. Ashford made a mistake. That mistakes don't make you bad. Declan's throat closed up. Couldn't speak. Your dad's right, Sarah said quietly. Mistakes just make you human. Or orc, Tommy said. Or whatever. Yeah, or whatever. They sat on the porch for an hour. Sarah talked about bees. Tommy listened, asking questions that showed he'd been thinking about this longer than just today. Declan sat quiet, unsteady hands in his lap, listening to a conversation about second chances happening in the language of honey and hives. When they stood to leave, Tommy reached out and touched Declan's hand, the trembling one. These shake because they remember, the boy said. That means you cared. My dad told me that. Said people who don't care don't shake. Declan's vision blurred. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Can I come see the hives sometime? Tommy asked. Anytime you want. Walking back to the farm, Sarah took his hand, the one that shook, held it steady. See, she said, broken things still have worth. And it was the 4th time she'd said it, but this time it landed different, like something finally believed instead of just repeated. 3 years later, the farm looked different. 6 hives had become 18. The house had a new porch wider with chairs that actually matched. The fence line ran straight and true. The barn held supplies instead of a makeshift bedroom. Declan stood at the hives on a warm June morning, showing Tommy, 14, now taller but still thin, how to check for mites without disturbing the brood pattern. See here, Declan pointed to a section of comb. This clustering means the queen's healthy, strong laying pattern. Tommy leaned in, breathing careful and slow. His lungs would never be right, but he'd learned to work around them. Learned that stillness had its own power. I see it, he said. Sarah walked up from the house carrying lunch wrapped in cloth. She moved easy now, comfortable in skin that had spent 3 years learning it belonged here. How's he doing? She asked. Natural, Declan said. Got the patience for it. Tommy beamed. They ate on the porch bread and cheese and honey from their own hives sold under the label Ashford Honey in 3 counties. The business wasn't big, but it was steady, enough to live on, enough to matter. Ruth says demand's up again, Sarah said. Want us to know if we can supply 15 more jars next month. We can manage that. Told her we could. Martha walked up the drive, moving slower than she used to, but still steady. She and her mother Ruth had become regular visitors, along with half a dozen others from town, who decided that judging people for their skin or their past was more trouble than it was worth. Brought you the mail, Martha said, handing over a stack of letters. And this, she held up a newspaper. You made the Hastings Gazette. The article was small, buried on page 6, but it was there. Local apiary becomes refuge for half-blood orcs learning trade skills. Refuge is a strong word, Declan said. You got 3 orc kids here learning beekeeping. That's a refuge. She wasn't wrong. Over the past year, word had spread. Young orcs, half-bloods, mostly the ones their clans didn't want, had started appearing at the fence line, seeing if the stories were true. Asking if there was a place where green skin didn't matter, where all that counted was whether you could work. Declan and Sarah took them in, taught them hives, taught them that broken didn't mean useless. Robert Price appeared at the end of the drive, walking slow. Over the past 3 years, his visits had changed from hostile to hesitant to something approaching friendship. He checked on Tommy's progress every month, and his old grudges worn down to something like respect. Afternoon, Robert had said, climbing the porch steps. Tommy ready to head home? Just about, Declan said. Robert looked at the hives at the house at Sarah, working with the young apprentices in the distance. You've built something good here. We had help. Still, Robert shifted his weight. I was wrong about a lot of things. Thought you should know. Declan's throat tightened. Appreciate that. Robert nodded, called to Tommy, and they headed home together, father and son walking slow to match damaged lungs, but walking forward. The sun dropped toward the western hills, painting everything gold. The hives hummed their constant song. The apprentices, 3 young orcs, barely into their 20s, finished their work and headed to the barn they'd converted into sleeping quarters. Declan and Sarah stayed on the porch watching the day end. You ever think about what Ruth said, Sarah asked, and about this place being a refuge of some tomorrow? You think that's what we built on purpose? I think we built what we needed. Turned out other people needed it too. She was quiet for a moment. My grandmother used to say the best things happen by accident. You aim for one thing, end up with something better. She was right about a lot of things. She was. Behind them, 18 hives hummed in the darkness. 90,000 bees that had started as 60,000, that had started as barely 30,000 in 6 dying colonies. All of them alive because 2 broken people decided that maybe possibly they could fix something together. I'm glad you stayed, Declan said. Me too. His hand found hers in the dark, still trembling slightly. Always would, but less than before. Less every year. Broken things still have worth, she said quietly. It was the 5th time. The last time. The time that made it true. Yeah, Declan said, they do. When they sat on the porch as night settled full and complete, 2 people who'd been traded for honey and transformed into something neither of them expected. Proof that the discarded and the damaged could build something worth keeping. The hives hummed, the stars turned overhead, and somewhere in the house behind them, a pot of honey sat ready for tomorrow's market, golden and sweet, and made by creatures that knew the value of working together. Damaged things still functioning, still valuable, still home.